Hello, everyone. I'm Lawrence Singleton, Dean of the Lubin School of Business. I'm pleased to welcome today Miss Monica Gawet, President of Tennessee Marble Company, a company based in Friendsville, Tennessee, near Knoxville. She's a third-generation family member in the stone business and is the sole owner of the company. Tennessee Marble Company has had a major influence on many buildings in the United States. Over 2,000 buildings in the U.S. have Tennessee marble in them. And while her company has done work in many places, she's most proud of two projects in New York City. One is the renovation of Grand Central Terminal in 1996 through 98, and most recently, Moynihan Trail Hall in Penn Station, with the floor and wall stone completed in 2022. And I think you're going to see that in her background in a few minutes, I think. A link to these and much more of her company's work is available on her company's website. In 2007, the company acquired another Tennessee marble operation, making them the sole supplier of Tennessee pink marble. Monica is a big believer in community service. She's served her community in many ways, including she's a past president of the Marble Institute of America, which is now known as the Natural Stone Institute. She's a retired board member of the Blount County Economic Development Partnership, former Blount County School Board member and Blount County Education Foundation, as well as past chair of the Maryville City Schools Foundation. She's obviously big into education as well. She was recognized with the Women in Stone Pioneer Award from the National Stone Institute in 2018 that recognizes women for their personal accomplishments in the natural stone industry, and she's mentored other women in the field. She's a graduation of the Lubin School of Business at Pace University. She earned her Bachelor of Business Administration degree with a major in finance in 1983. Please welcome Monica Gawet to the Dean's Roundtable. I'd like to begin by just asking you to tell us a little bit more about your story, and welcome here today. Thank you for making your time available to us.
Thank you so much, Dean Singleton. I am so grateful and excited and a little nervous to be with you all, but I am very happy to share my story and to tell you how I became a student at Pace and how my studies at Pace University played a significant role, I believe, in my success, both when I started in New York and now in the past 32 years being an entrepreneur. First of all, I am a native of Vermont, near the ski country, Rutland. And as Dean mentioned, I spent a lot of my time and years around the table hearing about marble because my grandfather started a small marble company, and then my dad and his brother and sister created a larger company there in Vermont and started in doing some commercial work. But when I was growing up there in Vermont, I never really was very interested in entering the family business because it was relatively small. To some degree, looking back on it, I would certainly say that the lack of seeing other female role models probably played some type of role, but that never daunted me because I was the youngest of 4 children, and my siblings were all boys. And so my dear brothers certainly toughened my skin. I will say that. So if any of you have siblings, and maybe if your relationship feels a little rough around the edges, believe me, that actually builds your character. It truly, truly does. There's so much that I could kind of say about the years as a young person in high school, going in and out of my father's shop and factory. I did like going to visit because I liked to see what was happening. It was a very small shop. We're talking about a shop of maybe only 10,000 square feet, where pieces of stone were meticulously handled and some carved. And I was thinking about this just a few days ago, that there were 2 retired Italian craftsmen who worked for my dad, and they did, carving work. And at that time, there were no CNCs or shaping machinery that we have now. And they were so fond and engaging with me. They probably had a role in my passion. However, as I will say, maybe some of you feel the same way or not from the New York area, Vermont just wasn't my place. I had met someone at the first school that I went to. I am a transfer student to Pace University, just so that you all, know that. And I was a transfer to Pace University because I did love the city. And I felt that New York offered so many exciting and interesting challenges for me. So personally, I wanted to challenge myself. Okay. And that was a huge challenge for someone coming from a community of maybe 12 or 15,000 people to find themselves with 1 million people in New York. But I loved it. I loved the energy that New York offered. When I found myself at my prior school in Connecticut, it didn't feel serious enough for me. I wasn't challenged. So one of my dear friends that I met in college lived in New Jersey. She took me home a couple of times. She took me into the city, and I absolutely fell in love. So I started looking at schools to transfer to. And you know all of the schools that there are in New York to transfer to. But Pace was business oriented. And even though a big part of my passion was literature and reading and writing, I knew though that probably in my heart, I wanted to have a career that was somehow maybe related to finance, banking, even the stock market. So I obtained entry and approval to come to Pace. And I was a full-time student. I lived out in Queens, and I commuted every day into the downtown campus. It was exciting for me. It was challenging because I was a transfer student and already then entering basically my junior year. I found the opportunities for an internship and received an internship at a small kind of boutique um, uh, um, research company that was called Cates Consulting on Trinity Place. We all know that area now, Trinity Place, and some of the horrific things that happened there on 9/11. And I would go to the church and eat my lunch there. Okay. Thank goodness it survived though. Um, Cates Consulting was run by a husband and wife team. And my immediate manager was a woman, very sharp. And the ownership there did research specifically in banking. I was just an analyst, quote, analyst, at that time that entered data. And folks, it wasn't entering data into a computer. It was manual type of stuff. So the calculations and the analysis was manual. You guys will probably laugh at that. Please do. Please do laugh at that. But we're talking about 40 years ago. And yes, you can compliment me for looking so young still 40 years later. So I saw the vision of, female role models. I had an internship, et cetera. And then I stayed within that internship for, I think, until my graduation. And I used a placement firm because of that background that I had. I really had a great leg up to entering into finance. Second wonderful stroke of luck. I work for a company called Atalanta Sosnoff Corporation. Martin Sosnoff was the chair, the owner. And I was fortunate enough to work kind of, again, as an analyst, but primarily doing, if some of you are finance majors, duration analysis, helping the firm in portfolio management for the bond portion of the portfolio. Again, computers were starting to get a little bit more common there, and there was a little bit more generated analysis that was taking place. Very serious firm, and they had people on the trading floor. So I got exposed to that entire world. It was an amazing part of my experience. And because of the opportunity that Pace offered me for the internship, that allowed me to have experience on my resume, I was the happiest person that you could imagine, having a foothold into that career. Um, so I wasn't there, unfortunately, for a very long period of time. I left the company just a couple of years after and then went all the way across the country to San Francisco. The best of both worlds, right? East Coast, West Coast. And then I secured a position with an investment banking firm that also had ties to New York called Keefe, Bruyette and Woods. And they were a banking analysis firm. Moving to San Francisco was very liberating for me because, again, I knew no one in San Francisco. I was rebounding in a relationship, so I did go out there with someone who had some familiarity with Northern and Southern California. And then, so I worked there for a while. And then the banking crisis occurred circa 1985, 1986, and the federal banking, the Department of the Treasury, Federal Reserve, whatever way you want to refer to them, were looking for candidates to help them with the banking crisis. I got a great offer. I left Keefe, Bruyette and Woods and became a part of the Department of the Treasury, specifically the Office of Thrift Supervision. I was an examiner. I was an analyst. I worked for our department head of the Office of Thrift Supervision, which was a great honor. And I learned the nuts and bolts of what does a healthy bank look like. So incredible experience for me, right? Capable for any of you that are in finance or economics. So I stayed in that position until 1993. 1991, technically. I took a sabbatical and I spent some time back in Vermont with my dad, who was interested in seeing how we could expand his business. Nothing really came of that. I took a sabbatical. I went back to San Francisco. And then my dad literally calls me and says, there's a deal out there. There's a potential for a company in Tennessee. I'd like you and your brother to consider, to look at it and see. So I hopped on a plane. I met my brother. And we drove to what seemed like the middle of nowhere and looked at an incredible factory that was vacant. There were no employees. There was no whip. There was no work, nothing. But it was a fabulous factory. It's probably one of the nicest factories that was in operation at the time. So kind of long story short, helped my dad with the underwriting and the due diligence, literally combing through paperwork. And then when it came time for, the family to decide who was going to be the president, my two other brothers basically said, no. And so I talked to my husband, and this was in 93, and we both decided, well, if we were going to take a risk, now's the time to do it. If you're going to take a risk, folks, take a risk when you're a little bit younger, unless you happen to win the lottery or something like that. Evaluating your risks and opportunities are obviously very, very important. So on the day that I signed the acquisition papers and then was elected to be president, I was in ownership with my two other brothers. My dad was not part of the ownership, but he started the initial seed money, and then I secured financing for him a year later, and then the company got on its own feet. I said this to Dean earlier. I did feel very much like a fish out of water. So here I was, a person who had this kind of glamorous career, first in New York and then in San Francisco, and I find myself basically at the foothills of the Smoky Mountains in Appalachia. It was a huge challenge. I did everything from collecting punch cards for payroll to answering the phone, and to helping my brother with quotes, because I didn't know how to do any of this. You don't know what you don't know. He was instrumental, of course, in unlocking the doors and starting up the machinery, and it was he and I and two other employees. We later then grew because of, fortunately for restoration type of work. And a critical part of my career, really, it was a phone call. It was either probably 1995 from a contractor in New York who literally said, we have to match the east stair of Grand Central Terminal because it is being massively remodeled. And the new stair has to look like the old stair, which incidentally, if you don't know the story, Grand Central Terminal almost was torn down. And right, and it was Jackie Kennedy Onassis, who really is credited for saving Grand Central. So if you walk through Grand Central and you see how gorgeous it is today, it wasn't quite so gorgeous in the late 80s and the 90s. It's just one of my most favorite spaces. So they were adamant that the stone matched. And the stone for the stair was this material called dark rose. If you go there and you see the stair, you will be amazed that a stair that was done in 1910 and then the new stair that was done in 1998 looks almost identical. It was my first big project, and it really wasn't a big project. I think overall maybe 5 or 6,000 square feet because we replaced a bunch of paving too. That probably sparked my passion because I felt I'm not just doing some kitchen countertop for somebody. I am helping to continue the legacy of Tennessee pink marble. And not only, and it's going in one of the oldest continuing operating train halls in the country. What an incredible thing to be able to say. So just kind of going back a little bit in 1993 when I signed those papers, I found out that I was pregnant with my first child. So move 3,000 miles away, start a business, and find out that you're expecting with your first child. It was nerve-wracking. My husband actually stayed in San Francisco for about 6 months after I got here, and then came and took a position with a satellite company, kind of doing finance stuff while I did this. And I told myself, yeah, I can be a mother and a business owner at the same time. Very difficult thing to do. I don't care if you're a husband, a wife, whatever, whoever your partner is. It's a tough thing to do. But be mindful of it, but it's very, very doable. And it was so rewarding because for me, work and home were 20 minutes from one another. And I was fortunate enough to have someone to come to my home every day and to take care of my first child. And then the first turned into the second and then the third. I look back and say, how did that all happen? Obviously, it all happened because I understood some of my limitations. I was good at interacting with people, with our customers, with being organized, I enjoyed doing quotes. That part I was fine. In the factory, it was a whole nother thing because you can only learn so much in a period of time. So, but fortunately, after some of the initial staff came and people found out that the factory had been reopened, we were fortunate to be able to hire some folks that had phenomenal experience, primarily in drafting. And drafting is very important in my line of work because we're talking about precision. We're not talking just about slabs of stone or crushed up material. We're talking about specific cut to size pieces for something like treads and pavers and all of those things that go into a Grand Central terminal. So we grew, and then I did have competition all the way up to 2005, which sometimes was difficult because we didn't have a good working relationship with my quote competition. Sometimes there were kind of nasty things that would be said or insinuated that we were just a tile company, things like that. So again, those kinds of things sparked my desire to prove people wrong, that a woman could be a leader, especially in this business. I want to say that I was very fortunate to get involved in something called the Natural Stone Institute. At that time, it was called the Marble Institute of America. And the Marble Institute had one female president, and she was from Canada, Margaret Panzera. I didn't have a whole lot of interaction with her, but I was like, this is great because the majority of the industry was absolutely dominated in terms of leadership, by men. But over my 30-year history, it's phenomenal how many women are in construction. Phenomenal for me when I go to a job site and women are in engineering, they're in CAD, they're in drafting, they're in project management. It's phenomenal. And so my story is just 30 years ago, it wasn't that way. The person that was on the board of directors of the Marble Institute, her name was Barbara Cohen, was the stone contractor for Grand Central Terminal. So we had a relationship and we were able to build that relationship. And I absolutely consider her a role model. She had already been working in her business for at least, I think, maybe 15 years. So she had a tremendous amount of experience. And when I think about the 30 years and the people that I came in contact with, men or women, for the most part, everybody was so gracious. And when you're new to an industry or a trade or a field, the most effective way for me to learn more was to go to other factories, to be involved in a trade association, because it was almost like osmosis, where you hear things and you have these aha moments, and you open up your world to more information. While being at a desk is great for if your career requires you to do that, but being out in the field is critical. And I don't care what it is, being out in the field, in whatever area you're in, engaging with other people, other industry leaders, or people at your level, above your level, helps you to grow. And I absolutely attribute my ability to grow and engage and to understand what my role was very, very critical. I want to say something else about in 1998, only, 3.5, barely 4 years after I had been here, my father passed away. A huge disappointment. He was only 73. So we never got to see, quote, the success. Because then after Grand Central Terminal happened and we realized that quarrying was critical to our success, then we had to put together our own quarry team and to be very vertically integrated. I obtained a lease for another 2 other small quarries in the area, so I could expand the offerings for the type of Tennessee material that we offered, because a big part of our work was match existing. There's a lot of projects that I can talk about. Maybe we do that kind of in the Q&A, but all of you as students, whether you're going to be an entrepreneur and dream of having your own business or not, or you're going to be working for someone, it's important to be prepared for what's not expected. Okay. And it certainly wasn't expected for me. For my brother, who had started in the initial operation, said, I really want to go back to Vermont. Is this okay with you, Monica? And I said, yes. His happiness was important. So at that time, then my father passes away. So he has to deal with everything there, with the family company there. My husband decided to join the business, and we had to get really serious about our team, who were people that were doing our takeoffs and our shop tickets and things of that nature, and to be looking at machinery that we needed to invest in. It was not until about 2015, maybe 2014, that we acquired our first CNC machine, which is a 5-axis saw, and allowed us to do kind of intricate work. But let me kind of go back to the necessity of preparing. There's no way to know what the next day or the next weeks or the next month might look like, whether you're a part of just a team of a corporation or if you're part of a business. Maybe one of you has a family business or has some family business background and are thinking about these things. They are very difficult to navigate, because I will say family business is very complicated, because you must have the ability to separate your relationship with your sibling or your mom or your dad or other, and be able to be professional about the nuts and bolts and the pennies and the nickels and who's doing what. I think that's probably one of my best pieces of advice. I know maybe you take all of that for granted when you are working for somebody, but it is a partnership. It's a little bit like a marriage, but finding the way to separate the roles of who's doing what and to respect those roles, I hope is advice that is well received from you, because my story had a lot to do with that. Later in 2012, I made the decision to buy the other shareholders out of the company. And so that's what led me to being the sole owner of Tennessee Marble Company. And I have a great relationship with my two surviving brothers. And it was part of kind of their happiness, in the fact of them wanting to live in Vermont and not living in Tennessee. I've learned to love it here in Tennessee. Okay, Dean, what haven't I mentioned that I should talk about that I might have
No,
skimmed
this
over?
well, this is great. I didn't want to interrupt you. You were doing so well here, but a couple of things that you brought up that I wanted to ask about, and I want to give everybody else here an opportunity to ask questions, all the students. So you can, I'm going to ask a couple real quick myself, but
Please.
you can either do this, you can, do it with the raised hand function inside Zoom, or you can put them in the chat, and Molly McGinty, who's on the call, will manage the chat for us. But please take advantage of this opportunity to meet this very successful alumna of the Lubin School of Business and ask her questions while she's here with us. So I'd like to begin by talking about what you said about being a woman in the industry. I don't really think of the stone industry as a place where there are many women. You said that's changed over the years. Could you
Absolutely.
elaborate a little bit on that and talk about some of the opportunities that you see for someone who gets a finance degree like you and
Mhm.
then does something that I would think really is something completely different?
Yes, it is. My world is a bit artistic and technical, and combined with all of those things. So
Mhm.
it's an industry that has so many options, for both men and women. Um, um, it's about understanding yourself and what your strengths and weaknesses are and where you can find passion. If you happen to be a person who really enjoys being around people, engaging with architects, engineers, designers, etc., um, remember that that's an important part of your success. Because if you really are a little bit more introverted and you really don't like being in a big crowd or kind of have difficulty, then that means probably the technical end would be much more enjoyable for you, whether it's kind of making, drafting or drawing or doing the mechanical stuff of it. Extremely important. It is such a diverse industry. It's phenomenal. So when I came on to this industry, Barbara Cohen, Miller Truck, there in New York, was the only current female owner like myself in the industry. Shortly thereafter, another woman and a husband and wife team started a limestone company in Texas. And then the only other female owner was in Italy. So I do consider myself to be very much a unique story and a minority in the industry. It's changed so much though. And it's changed because so many more women have gone to college, so many more women have found their niche in technical fields, and they blow me away because I still cannot open up a set of drawings and do a takeoff. I can do a limited takeoff and see a plan or an elevation and figure it all out, but then beyond that, I can't. And so I have my limitations, but your passion of, do I really want to see things done a certain way? Do I like perfection? Those are just really important things to ask yourself as a student as you're going through these classes or you're engaging in other with other students. You got to know, you got to know your stuff. And I do want to teach a touch on something about that, Lawrence. Way back, I sometimes felt like I had to be a quiet mouse in a room in my first few years because it was very intimidating. So I was limited as to the things that I could engage in. And so when I think regardless now in our world, you got to know your stuff, whatever it is that your role is, your responsibility. Take that responsibility really seriously, because that's how you advance. Okay. I wouldn't have been in business for 32 years now if I didn't do quality work. Would you all agree with that? And it's the same, regardless of what it is that you're doing, whatever level that you're in for working for a corporation or for yourself, maybe as an independent contractor in any field, you will advance if you work hard, and you show people that you care about your work. I really cared about my work because I felt that my reputation went back to the reputation of my father and even my grandfather. So I had that intrinsic desire to not make a mistake. I was really scared to make a mistake. So I had people around me that helped me to not do that. I never had a project rejected. I never made some kind of huge mistake that blew something up or created some kind of a failure. And I think that was because of a quality team and wanting to do a good job always. Did I kind of answer that question? Okay.
Absolutely. No, that's great. It's really, really wonderful. Yeah. I want to ask you one more, and then I want to give the students a chance to ask too.
Sure.
I imagine many of the students, if not all of them, would love the opportunity to work all over the country like you did, many different locations. I mean, what challenges did you experience when you moved from the Northeast to California to Tennessee, all those things?
Mm.
I imagine they were challenging things, big decisions that you had to face before you made such big moves. What was that like for you? Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Oh, wow. I think there was a lot of it fear and anxiety. I'd be kidding you if I didn't say that. I mean, there was a couple of times when I was still living here alone and I was kind of living in a hotel, or in a small rented house, because it was day to day starting the company. It was very frightening. There was a lot of anxiety, and there were times I would call my husband and I would be bawling. And I'm being very honest with you. It could happen to anyone when you start a business because you're just like either overwhelmed. And I was a little overwhelmed because not only was I starting a business and continuing a legacy of my own family business, I was pregnant with our first child and starting a company. So that was incredible. But in terms of living in different parts of the country, Dean Singleton, one of the best experiences that a student can have, because you're picking up your roots from all of your comfort and you're putting yourself in a very sometimes uncomfortable situation. I didn't know anybody out west. I mean, I didn't know anybody. And somehow I found the personal strength to do that. If you don't feel like you have the personal strength to do that, don't do it. But part of growing is pushing yourself, and understanding where your outer limits are. Certainly, I would never advocate pushing yourself or finding your outer limits where you feel so uncomfortable that anxiety takes so much of a hold over you and you fail. But there is such a fine line there between pushing yourself to further success and failure. So again, knowing yourself, knowing what your strengths and weaknesses are, and working in the right circumstances with support maybe at home or your friendships. Friendships are huge.
Mhm.
A partner, a spouse, friends, whatever. All of those things are really important. And I also like to journal. I
Hmm.
have so many journals of files in my phone where I voice what's happening here. And I always found that when I write that down, it helps to identify what the issues are in my head so I can address them.
Excellent. Excellent.
So I have not necessarily a question from the chat, but one of our students, Gianna, unfortunately had to hop off, but she wanted to thank you for your very inspiring story. She said her dad was a construction worker with the Bricklayers Union, and she was thrilled to hear about such an amazing story from a female trailblazer in the
Thank
industry.
you. I'm grateful.
And I also had another question. You mentioned before that you've been a part of so many projects throughout your tenure at this company. Is there any particular ones that stand out? Obviously, Grand Central stands out, but any ones that you're particularly proud of that might not be as flashy as Grand Central?
Absolutely. There are a number of them. Another flashy, though, is my backdrop here on Moynihan Train Hall, which I think is incredible that the same stone contractor, Barbara, that did the restoration at Grand Central Terminal was the stone contractor for Moynihan. That's a story in itself of two women that met in 1998, 96, didn't know each other, and then found another opportunity to work together. I'm so grateful for that. Less, big shiny projects. I remember that we made a cancer survivor ribbon. We gave a chunk of marble to a sculptor who had lost his sister from breast cancer, and he made a beautiful ribbon for her. I was just overjoyed when I saw that. We have two pieces of Tennessee pink marble and at Statuary Hall at U.S. Capitol Visitor Center. One was a statue that was carved by a Native American for the state of New Mexico. And that was a great thrill to see just a raw block of marble turn into something beautiful. And it was called the Pope sculpture. We worked with that Native American sculptor again. His name was Cliff Rawa in Alabama just a few years ago. So same opportunity where he came to us requesting a block of marble that went to his carving studio in New Mexico, and he carved it into something amazing. I have so much admiration for people who can take a piece of rock and turn it into something gorgeous. I mean, nothing against Michelangelo, but wow. That is so unique. And I am grateful for little and small projects, but it's that human touch when you know that you've made somebody happy. And we recently did a monument marker for a family here who is also tied to the Tennessee marble industry. And that just makes me happy. Just makes me happy to see somebody happy with a piece of our stone.
Wonderful. I have another question from the chat from Luke. Was it easy for you to move from your finance job to the stone industry, even though you had family ties? Did you ever miss your old job?
Yes. Yes, I really did. Not that I missed banking per se, but I missed kind of the professional environment. I missed doing something that did not have the level of risk that I was doing as a stone supplier. Very different. I still keep in touch with some of the colleagues, though, way back from that industry, which I'm really grateful for. We have just kind of old stories, and I missed it, but this has been very fulfilling to me. So that's probably another message. You may kind of really love what you're doing, but suddenly find yourself inspired to do something else. And I love the story of letting that kind of passion lead you to something, but it doesn't necessarily have to be work. Luke, you may find that if you love finance, wow, share it, share it somehow in a nonprofit way. You must have so many opportunities in New York or New Jersey or Long Island or wherever you're from to find a way to be a mentor, possibly. I've done that. I've had employees come to me and say, Monica, I know you know a lot about financing and you're so smart. And I have gotten so much joy in helping to explain something like lending or security or finance or economics or changes in tax policy or trade or whatever. I enjoy sharing. And so even though I missed it, obviously the challenges were phenomenal to be starting a business and to be doing these projects where I really didn't miss it at all. What I missed is I missed my friendships back in San Francisco. And I'm happy of the 4 or 5 couples that we had relationships with. I still have relationships with 3 or 4 of them. So So that's all. These days with Zoom and email and text messages, it's easy to stay in touch with people. Like it, wish it wasn't so much so in the early 90s.
Oh, Ritika, did you have a question?
Yes. Hi, Monica. It's so nice to, listen to your entire story. Very, very inspiring.
You're
My
so kind.
question is that you spoke about Tennessee Marble being your family's legacy, which
Yeah.
today is your legacy. And I want to ask, like, going forward, how do you envision the future of it? How do you plan to make that transition from it being your family's legacy to your legacy today? And what is going to be its future? And, you know,
Yeah, great question, but a very, very tough question. My 3 children have their own careers at this time. So I do not have the legacy of turning it into a fourth generation. I'm sad to say. However, I'm very passionate about the legacy and finding the right team to put into another set of hands. I am not so tied to, because you can't be, and I'm glad that you brought that up, but it's a tough issue because there are many family businesses in our industry. But what I have felt was very important to me as a parent is to never put pressure on my children to do something that I think that they should be doing. My husband and I felt very strongly that they need to find their own place. They need to find what their specialty is, where they want to live, what it is that they want to do. And they will always know that they are part of that legacy because they can go to so many different places throughout the country and see mom's work. Okay, I'm very grateful for that. But I think that can be a downfall in a family business when you say, well, I want to give my business, I want to see my family in the hands of another family member. That can doom the family business. Do you understand what I'm saying?
yeah.
Great question. I love it. But at this moment, it may need to be in the hands of a different.
I asked that because I have so many friends back home who eventually, pursue their careers. At the end of the day, I think 75-80% of them have ventured back into their family businesses, in spite getting those degrees and everything. And I would always sit with them and ask, I said, like, how did you make this whole move and then come back to it? And they eventually realize that they've grown up with it, and they find their passion in it, and they feel connected.
Good.
They feel the responsibility to do it. So I wanted to understand how it works, on the other side of the globe as well. So,
Yeah.
which is why I wanted to ask you that
Yes.
question.
Well, I was also very fortunate that as much as my father wanted me to be involved in the business back in Vermont, I said, Dad, I can't. And he tried very hard even to try to keep me a little bit closer. The best he got was Connecticut and then New York. And it was a shock when I told him I was moving to San Francisco. But thankfully, he had respect for me and he let me find my own way. And then lo and behold, fate. I really do think that fate played a part of the role for me to have found my way here to Tennessee. And I also say personally, this is very much on a personal note, I can't tell you how much I enjoyed my years in New York, how much I enjoyed my years at Pace. And I want to say 2 other experiences that I missed talking about, and how much I enjoy living on the West Coast. And then I found myself basically in the middle. And I find myself, for me, similar to living the life that I was raised in as a native Vermonter, but with a bigger role and able to touch my community. And I touch my community by the employees that I have here, who are all from here, and supporting them and seeing their lives change and to be part of all of these projects that we did. But I was fortunate that I wasn't coerced, probably because my 2 other brothers were. And I was very fortunate. That I will always be grateful for my father for having a vision, despite being, part of the last generation, and allowing me to explore my strengths and weaknesses. I want to say two things also about two really great experiences that I remember at Pace, besides the internship that Pace helped me to obtain, critical to my career. Can't deny that. I was part of a debate team, okay, which was huge because I had to collaborate with other people that were on my team to debate a topic and then be in front of people, okay, to really take away shyness, very, very intimidating. And then I think it was the marketing class, and maybe you all have done this, where you had to pick a topic and you were filmed to see what you look like to other people in such a presentation filmed. I remember those two experiences. It's being so great, not to mention the law class, which was really just kind of an entry-level law, but corporate law. That was fabulous for me. I just kind of enjoy the law, probably black, white, yes, no, you can do this, you can't do that. So I hope you all take advantage of those types of opportunities at your school as well. Happy to answer any other questions, folks.
Oh, well, I do have one, if I may. And you actually touched on it in a little bit in your last answer. I wanted to ask you about how you put together your team. You're like, and I also am curious how many people work for you. But over the years, as you know, you can't be an expert in everything. Who helped you, or especially early on in your career, who helped you navigate that time when you were trying to put together a really strong team and go forward? And, you know, you don't know what you don't know. And that has to be a little scary, I imagine, as you're coming out of the box with a new business. So just,
Right.
yeah, looking for some
So I
insight.
think there's a few things there, Kim. Early on, there were folks here that were part of some of the prior companies operating here and literally picked up the phone and said, I heard you've reopened, or do you have job openings? I'd like to come work for you. Two really critical people that are unfortunately passed that worked for me, especially in the beginning, was a lovely man whose name was Jack Emge. Incredible experience as a draftsperson. And we're talking about, I don't know if any of you can relate, hand drawing drafting before CAD, way before CAD really took hold, which really took hold just in the past 20, 25 years. So very lucky, Kim. I can't take any credit for that. Someone to pick up the phone. Yeah, I've known your father. I know what your family has done. I know the machinery there. Can I come work for you? You do an interview and you're like, this guy knows his stuff. I better go ahead and hire him. He later then transitioned to, I think, another company or a different opportunity, was getting older. And one of the folks in my plant also had drafting experience and was getting older and said, yes, you're a wonderful transition to come into the office. So to make some nice human modifications for someone to be part of your group. Well, then that person says, I'm 62, I really want to retire. Then a whole new generation of a person, we put it out. I'm not sure how I did the recruitment. I'm sorry to say, Kim, I don't remember how we recruited. But 2012, 2015, I got fortunate to have a resume hit my desk from a person who was graduated from one of the SUNY schools that had CAD background, that worked in a family business doing basically cabinet kind of stuff. So very, very young. I think maybe he was 21 years old, moved here with his wife. And I got very lucky. I got very lucky with that. And then he was exposed to the CNC operation, did some kind of programming. You got to know what you need. And that is probably for me one of the most difficult decisions for an owner. Hiring people and firing people, figuring out what you need and holding those standards, because you have a reputation for your business, for what it is that has to happen within it. So these are just things that you can't avoid. Today, with things like Indeed, hugely beneficial. But there's been so many times when we've used a placement agency, paid the fee, all of those kinds of things to make sure that there is a good fit, because sometimes people say, yeah, I'm really interested. But then when it comes to the hands-on work or the environment, it's not the right fit. But in my first early years up to the year 2000, I was very fortunate to have some legacy people with great experience come to us. And then it was about 12 years after that, we had to go into a whole nother generation of new people. And pretty much a lot of training involved, a lot of hands-on training, and then seeing the spark within them and go, wow, they have the spark. They've got what it takes to kind of fall in love with the business.
And is technology advancing, impacting your business in a big way?
Well, I attended a strategic meeting with our trade association, and AI is going to, it's not yet, but it will, because AI will be doing things like sorting colors of different types of stones, variations, things of that nature. There is many improvements in machinery that weren't around, that fortunately we do have. We have something that's called a Fantini Turna, and it looks like a backhoe with a huge, not huge, but a large, almost chainsaw looking arm at the back of it, and it can be used to drive around a quarry or a quarry site or a yard and trim a block. You're not setting up a wire, you're not setting up a drill, etc. So, but the overall method of quarrying is kind of the same, but there's greater technologies in wire saw and drills and how you set that machinery up. It's still outside, it's still muddy, it's dirty, it's wet, it's hot, it's cold. All of those things still exist. But I think AI and CAD certainly are important things. But the human eye is still so critical for us, because the person who's taking that slab of marble and making the cut and inspecting it and following the guidelines for what's acceptable and not is still within a human capacity.
When, as a business owner, I should say, you need to know everything, right? You're not going to be an expert in all the fields of your areas of your business, but you have to know everything. Which
You have to know everything, but not necessarily be an expert at it. Correct, Dean?
Yeah, but there's only 24 hours in a day. So how do you manage your time? And how, for students who see this now or see it on video, how important is it to get good time management skills under your belt right now?
Yeah,
How do you
I
do it?
think very, very important. And you know what I find myself getting easily distracted is because my phone will be here and something will ding or bing or whatever, and I'll get distracted. And so I think I like to have lists. I keep a list of what I am doing, and I tick down that list for what's important, what's my priority. Because as you can imagine, my priorities can get off the rail really quickly with something that is happening within the shop or plant or a client or whatever, and that list goes away. I'm not an expert in time management because I'm a little bit of an overachiever, and I spend a lot of my time either here at work or at home. And I caution people about leaving their phone on all throughout the day and into the evening. I tend to shut mine off, or when I get home, unless there's something that I'm critically looking for, I'm not looking at my emails anymore, because I think that can be destructive to the time that you need at home to prepare a meal, to go exercise, to go play pickleball. I love yoga right now. I like to bike, I like to ski. And those things help you to clear your mind. Even taking a walk across that gorgeous Brooklyn Bridge behind you can be meditative. Going up to Central Park and taking a walk, I think, can be wonderful. Spending time with family. I'm sure that the pressures as a student are even greater, maybe, than they were for me. I bet that they are, because you're trying to juggle all these things, including social media. And I only encourage you and suggest that you take a break from it. Don't get overwhelmed by social media. Find and make your priorities and then try to let those be your guide.
Mhm. Well, speaking of all the things you just mentioned, what is your typical day like, if there is such a thing as a typical day
Yeah.
for you?
Yep. My typical day is, I'm really not much of a morning person, but I get up somewhere between 6 and 6:30. I have like a big glass of water. I have 2 cups of coffee, and then I look to see if I have any text messages from anyone here in the plant that's urgent for me to, for me to know. I look at my calendar for appointments or visits or things that need to be done. And then I put my makeup on, get dressed for my day, fill up the coffee mug again and make my drive. And then I get to the office and I look at my emails, check if there's anything, urgent, walk through the shop, check in on people. I do have a COO at this time, so I'm not doing day-to-day operations. I'm more of an overseer at this point and take on projects that I need to, like the entire team of staff does. So that's kind of my day. Typically, I bring lunch and then I'll listen to some of my favorite, I'll check into the news or listen to a podcast or something like that. Or I'll go to the cafe in town, and if I need a break, I'll go there for a cup of tea or for coffee or close my door. And then I'm typically here till 5 unless I'm trying to go to a class or play pickleball on a Friday, and try to get out a little earlier.
Sounds great. Sounds like a great life to me. Yeah, that sounds wonderful to me. Yeah.
And to see interesting stuff getting done, right?
Yeah.
There's something beautiful about seeing something finish, or to see a piece of stone go, oh wow, that's just beautiful.
That's right. Yeah. Okay, we have time for one last question. If anybody has one, please take advantage of her while she's here.
I have one last question. So I was just wondering, going back to what you said before, how did your female role models from early in your career help inform your leadership style, and how does it impact the way you run your company now?
Okay, great question. My first role models of females were just a few, okay, within the industry. And one was very, very tough, and one was more a little bit quiet. And I just observed from that. I also used other role models that were men that I thought were running a really good company, and I tried to engage with them, or we would have discussions about the struggles that we have within the industry. In terms of my style, it really took me a long time to understand my style because I tended to be a micromanager, which is not good. Okay. And it was not that I wanted to control what was happening. I wanted to know what was happening. And so that can be something that you really have your staff to explain. I'm not trying to micromanage what it is that you're doing. I want to understand what you're doing so that I make sure that if there's something that is different or that we should do better or differently, that I understand that. I love to read biographies, and some of the biographies that I feel help me to understand myself and my style to a certain degree were biographies by Martha Graham. She has an incredible story. I mean, talk about a struggle. Her husband commits suicide and she has to take over the Washington Post. I loved Andre Agassi's autobiography because of the struggle of what it was like to be a tennis player. And I love tennis. That's one of my favorite things to kind of watch. And I also love American history, our founding fathers. I think it's almost a daily awareness. But one thing that we did, about 6 or 7 years ago, we participated in a team study where you evaluate your personality type. And I am a bit of a combination of a perfectionist, and with technical stuff and artistic stuff kind of mixed in. I found so much wisdom in understanding my personality. I love people. I like to be around people, and how that affects my day-to-day role and being a manager. If you ever have the opportunity to do that, especially if it's in a team, it's fun, it's interesting, and you understand why maybe you like interacting with certain other people or not interacting. And it's not about them personally, it's about their character traits and their strengths. You know, think about someone who's an accountant or an engineer versus somebody who is an artist. You immediately then begin to understand people are not trying to be difficult or quiet or reserved. It's their personality. And I think it's really important that you understand your own personality and then the personalities of the people that you work with. It's a great kind of opening and understanding that it's not conflict. It's kind of how we're built and structured. I hope that was helpful, Alex.
Yeah. Look, I'm sorry we run out of
Thank
time. I want to thank you very much for making time for us this afternoon. You have a very interesting story. Obviously, you've done wonderful things in your career and your personal life. We appreciate you sharing that with the students here in the Lubin School of Business. I want to thank everybody who's on the call today and those who are watching on video. Monica, we have a small token of our appreciation. Unfortunately, I can't hand it to you over the Zoom call. So please look for something to arrive for you soon in Tennessee.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here. I want everybody
Thank
to
you. Absolute pleasure, absolute honor. Kim and Molly, thank you so much for reaching out to me and to ask me to be part of this roundtable. I enjoyed it very much.